So I finished the regulators. That scream. With the regulators, it is recommended. I'm gonna have to. The description is very confusing. The fact that the people that are in regulators are now in desperation and desperation. So regulators took place in Ohio, in North Ohio, actually. So this is a very thick book. Okay, it's actually kind of nice because it's scary. Give you guys an idea of thing. Nevada is mostly a long stretch of desert across somewhere else. And with, if you're lucky, because it's a scary place. Headed down Route 50 in the brutal summer heat are people who are never going to, like the Jacksons, professor and his wife going home to Carver's, the Wentworth, Ohio family bound for a vacation, aging literary line, Johnny inventing a gonzo image for himself, tried a 700. A dead cat nailed to a road sign heralds a town that seems withered in the shade of a made known, but it's worse than that. Much worse. Regulating the traffic there, polyetrian. This is the name I've had trouble with. Not sure. It's Entragian. Like intra. Yes. I will figure it out. An outsized, that's what it says, an outsized uniformed madman who considers himself the only law west of Pecos. God forbid. Really? Are you done? No? Hello? Harley! Come here. What are y'all barking at? There ain't nothing out there. Nothing. Good Lord. Probably the kids going by. They shouldn't be any kids because they're already in school. An outside uniformed madman who considers himself the only law west of the Pecos. God forbid you should be missing a license plate or find yourself with a flat tire. There's something very wrong here, all right? And Entragian is only the surface of it. Secrets embedded in depression's landscape, and the evil that infects the town in some viral hot zone, or like some viral hot zone, are both awesome and terrifying. But as young David Carver seems to know, though it scares him nearly to death to realize it, so are the forces summoned to combat them. In Desperation, Stephen King's sweeping brush paints an apocalyptic drama of God and evil, madness and revelation. Genius for suspense has never been so finely. His imagination so shudderingly vivid as when his wayfarers, the readers who dare to follow their, begin to discover the true meaning of the word desperation. So this book here, even it was written right for you guys. Right on. So this took place after, like, over 10 years after Bachman. So, how it goes. Now, the acknowledgments. They're in order, 4 people in particular. Rich Hassler of the Magma Mining Company. Yes, this is about mining. Well, the China Pit is. William Winston, Episcopalian minister. Chuck Verrill, my longtime and long-suffering, he add, editor. Tabitha King, wife and... Now you know the rest of the drill, constant reader. So let's say it together, shall we? For what's right, thank them. And King. The landscape of his poetry will still the desert. Salmon rush. So part 1, Highway 50, the House of the Wolf, House of the Scorpion. That is where we are going to start. And I have not started reading this yet. So we shall see how you guys take it, shall we? Oh, Jesus, gross. What, Mary? What? Didn't you see it? You what? He looked at him, and in the harsh desert sunlight, he saw that a lot of the color had gone out of her face, leaving just just the marks of sunburns on her cheeks and across her brow, where not even a strong sunblock cream would entirely protect her. Very fair and... That sign, that speed limit sign. What about it? There was a dead cat on it, Peter. Nailed there or glued there or some damn thing. He hit the brake pedal. She grabbed his shoulder at once. Don't you even think about going back. But what? Did you want to take a picture of it? No way, Jose. If I have to look at that again, I'll throw up. Was it a white cat? He could see the back of the sign in the rearview mirror. The speed limit sign she was talking about, presumably. But that was all. And when they'd passed it, he had been looking off in the other direction, at some birds flying toward the nearest wedge of mountains. Strictly attending to the highway was not something he had to do every second out. Nevada called its stretch of US 50, the longest highway in America, and in Peter Jackson's opinion, it lived up to its billing. Of course, he was a New York boy. He supposed he might be suffering a cumulative case of the creeps, desert agoraphobia, ballroom syndrome, something like that. No, it was a tiger stripe, she said. What difference does it make? I thought maybe Satanists in the desert, said. This place is supposed to be filled with weirdos. Isn't that what Merrill said? Intense was the word she used. Central Nevada is full of intense people, quote unquote. Gary said pretty much the same. But since we haven't seen anybody since we crossed the California state line, well, in Fallon, pit stops don't count, she said. Although, even there, the people, funny how look, he didn't see often in her face, although it had been common enough following her miscarriage. Why are they here, Pete? I mean, I can understand Vegas or Reno, even Winnemucca or Wendover. People who come from Utah to gamble there call Wendover Bend over. Peter said, grinning. Gary told. She ignored him. The rest of the state, people who are here, why do they come? Why did they stay? I know I was born and raised in New York, but so probably I can't understand, but you're sure that wasn't a white cat or a black one. He glanced back into the rear view. But at just under 70 miles an hour, the speed limit sign had already faded into the background of sand, heat, and dull brown foothills. There was finally another vehicle behind them, though. He could see a hot sun-star reflection breaking off its windshield. Maybe a mile back, maybe two. No, tiger stripe. I told you. Answer my question. Who are the Central Nevada taxpayers, and what's in it for them? He shrugged. There aren't any taxpayers out here. Fallon's the biggest town on Highway 50, and that's mostly farming. It says in the guidebook that they dammed their lake and made irrigation ponds. Cantaloupes is what they grow mostly. And I think there's a military base nearby. Fallon was the Pony Express stop. Did you know that? I'd leave, she said. Just pick up my cantaloupe and go. Touched her left breast briefly with his right hand. That's a nice set of cantaloupes, ma'am. Wow. Thanks. Not just Fallon, either. Any state where you can't see a house or even a tree in any direction and they nail cats to speed limit signs, I'd leave. Well, it's a zone of perception thing, said, speaking carefully. Sometimes he couldn't tell when Mary was serious, when she was just gassing. And this was one of those times. As someone who was raised in an urban environment, a place like the Great Basin is just outside your zone, that's all. Mine too, for that matter. Sky alone is enough to freak me out. Ever since we left this morning, I've felt it up there, pressing down on me. Me too. There's too goddamn much of it. Are you sorry we came this way? He glanced up into the rear view, saw the vehicle behind them growing close, or was closer now. Not a truck, which was just about all they'd since, seen since Fallon, and all headed the other way, west. Car, really burning up the road too. She thought about it, shook her head. No, it was good to see Gary and Merrill and Lake Tahoe. Beautiful, wasn't it? Incredible. Even this, Mary looked out the window. It's not without beauty. I'm not saying that. And I suppose I'll remember it the rest of my life, but it's creepy, he finished for her. From New York, at least. Damned right, she said. Urban zone of perception, and even if take an I-80, it's all desert. Yep, tumbling tumbleweeds. He looked into the mirror again. Lenses of his glasses he wore were driving glinting sun. The oncoming was a police car, doing at least 90. He squeezed over toward the shoulder until the right-hand wheels began to rumble on the hard pan, spume up dust. Pete, what you doing? Another look in the mirror. Big chrome grille, coming up fast and reflecting such a savage oblong of sun that he had to squint. But he thought the car was white, which meant it wasn't stationary. Making myself small, he said. We sleeky, cowrin. There's a cop behind us. He's in a hurry. Maybe he's got a line on. Police car blasted by, making the Acura, which belonged to Pete's sister, rock in its backlash. It was indeed white, dusty from the door handles down, decal on the side, but the car was gone before Pete caught more than a glimpse of it. That's something. Destry. That was a good name for a Nevada town out here in the big lone. On the guy who nailed the cat in the cross, or on the guy who nailed the cat to the speed limit sign. Why is he going so fast? Whose turn to run them for out here? Who's there to run them for out here? Well, she said, giving him an odd, funny look again. There's us. He opened his mouth to reply. He was right. Pop must have been seeing them for at least as long as they'd been seeing him, maybe longer. They hadn't been flipped. He hadn't flipped on his lights and flashers. Of course, Pete had known enough to get over on his, give the cop as much the road as he possibly could. Still, the police car's tail lights suddenly came on. Peter hit his own brake without even thinking of it. Though he had already slowed to 60 and the cruiser as far enough ahead so there was no chance of a collision, the cruiser swerved over into the westbound lane. What's he doing, Mary? I don't know exactly. But of course he knew. Slowing down, or has cut him off at the past 85 or 90, He had dropped to 50. Frowning, not wanting to catch up, not knowing why, Peter slowed even more himself. The speedometer of Desiree's car dropped down 40. Peter? Peter, I don't like this. All right, he said. Was it? He stared at the cop car, now tooling slowly up the westbound lane, to his left, and wondered. He tried to get a look at the person behind the wheel and couldn't. The cruiser's rear window was caked with desert dust. Tail lights, also caked with dust, flickered briefly as the car slowed even more. Now it was doing barely 30. Tumbleweed bounced into the road. The cruiser's radial tires crushed it. Came out the back, looking to Peter Jackson like a nestle of broken fingers. All at once he was frightened, very close to terror, in fact. He hadn't the slightest. Yes, as you can expect, this is why I haven't been on. I was sick over the weekend. You think I have ghosts in my house? Possible. That's what the dogs are barking at. I know I got a couple. See them, but I feel them. This is a very historic town, especially with Washington coming through French Creek and the canal. That is now, well, it's been blocked off for years, but they took the canal, and so it's very historic here. And the little bit of war that's happened here, possible. Yeah, no, I've been sick. Had a panic attack Monday. Got through that. Got through my little bit of a panic attack hangover. The sickness itself is still lingering, so I apologize for my. Because Nevada's full of intense people, Merrill said, so and Gary agreed. This is how intense people act. The word, weird. Of course, that was bullshit. This really wasn't weird. Not very weird, anyhow. Though, cop car taillights flickered some more. Peter pressed his own brake and not even thinking about what he was doing for a second. Then looking at the speedometer and seeing he was slowing down to 25. What does he want, Pete? By now, that was pretty obvious. To be behind us again. I don't know. Why didn't he just pull over to the shoulder and let us go past if that's what he wants? I don't know that either. What are you going to go by, of course? And then for no reason at all, he added, after all, we didn't nail the goddamn cat to the speed limit sign. He pushed down on the accelerator and immediately began to catch up with the dusty cruiser, which was now floating along at no more than 30. Mary grabbed the shoulder of his blue work shirt hard enough for him to feel the pressure of her short fingernails. No, don't. Mare, there's not a whole lot else I can do. And the conversation was already obsolete because he was going by even as he spoke. Desiree's Acura drew alongside the dusty white Capri, then passed it. Peter looked through two pieces of glass and saw very little. Big shape, man shape, that was about all. Plus the sense that the driver of the police car was looking back at him. Peter glanced down at the decal on the passenger side door, or in the passenger door. Now he had time to read it. Desperation to Police Department in gold letters below the town seal, which appeared to be a miner and a horseman shaking hands. Now he had time. Oh, let's see. Blah, 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 blah. Which appeared to be a miner and a horseman shaking hands. As soon as he was past, the white car swung back into the eastbound lane, driving up to stay at the Acura's bumper. It traveled that way for 30 or 40 seconds. To Peter, it felt considerably long. Then the blue flashers on the Caprice roof came on. Pete felt a sinking in his stomach, and it wasn't a surprise. Mary still had a hold of him, and now, as Peter swung onto the shoulder, she began digging in again. What are you doing? Peter, what are you doing? Stopping. He's got his flashers on, and he's pulling me over. I don't like it, she said, looking nervously around. There was nothing to look at but desert, foothills, and leagues of blue sky. What are we doing? Speeding seems logical. He was looking at the outside mirror. At the words, caution, objects may be closer than they appear. He saw the dusty white car's driver's door of the cop car swing open. A khaki leg swung out. It was prodigious. As the man it belonged to followed it out, swung the door of his cruiser closed, settled his smoky bear hat on his head. He wouldn't have been wearing it in the car, Peter supposed, not enough clearance. Mary turned around to look. Her mouth dropped ajar. Holy God, he's the size of a football player! At least, Peter said, doing a rough mental calculation that used the roof of the car as a steering point. About 5'5", he guessed. That was the cop approaching Desiree's Acura. Had to be at least 6'5". And over 250 pounds, probably over 300. Mary let go of him, scooted over against the door as far as she could, away from the approaching giant. On one hip, the cop wore a gun as big as the rest of him. But his hands were empty. Clipboard, no citation book. Peter didn't like it. He didn't know what it meant, but he didn't like it. His entire career as a driver, which had included 4 speeding tickets as a teenager and 1 OUI after after the faculty Christmas party 3 years ago, he had never been approached by an empty-handed cop, and he most definitely didn't like it. His heartbeat, already faster than normal, sped up a little more. Heart wasn't pounding, at least not yet, but he sensed it could pound, that it could pound very easily. Being stupid, you know that, don't you? He asked. It's speeding, that's all. Simple speeding. Posted limit is a joke, and everyone knows it's a joke. This guy's undoubtedly got a certain quota to meet. So, what's that old Van Halen album title? Eat 'em and Smile? Yes, I told you. Cop stopped beside Peter's window. Buckle of his Sam Brown belt on the level with Peter's eyes. He did not bend or raise his fist. To Pete, it looked like the size of a daisy can ham. Made cranking gesture. Peter took off his round rimless glasses, tucked them into his pocket, and rolled down. He was very aware of Mary's quick breathing from the passenger bucket. She sounded as if she was jumping rope, or perhaps... Ah! The cop did a slow, smooth, deep knee bend, bringing his huge and non-committal face into Jackson's field of vision. A band of shadow, cast by a stiff brim of a trooper-style hat, lay across his brow. His skin was an uncomfortably looking pink. Peter guessed that, for all his size. This man got along with the sun no better than Mary did. His eyes were bright gray, direct, but no emotion in them. None that Peter could read, anyway. He could smell something, though. He thought maybe Old Spice. The cop gave him only a brief glance, and then his gaze was moving around the Acura's cabin, checking Mary first, American wife, Caucasian, pretty face. Good figure, low mileage, no visible scars. Then looking at the cameras and bags, and road litter in the back seat. Not much road litter yet. They'd only left Oregon 3 days before. That included the day and a half they'd spent with Gary and Merrill Saturday, listening to old records and talking about old times. Cop's eyes lingered on the pull-out ashtray. Peter guessed he was looking for roaches, sniffing for the lingering aroma of pot or hash, and felt relieved. He hadn't smoked a joint in nearly 15 years, had never tried coke, had pretty much quit drinking after the Christmas party. Oh, yeah. Smelling a little cannabis at the occasional rock show was close as a drug experience as he ever came these days. Mary had never bothered with the stuff at all, sometimes referred to herself as a drug virgin. There was nothing in the pulled-out ashtray but a couple of balled-up, juicy fruit wrappers, and no discarded beer cans or wine bottles in the back seat. Officer, I know I was going a little fast. Had the hammer down, did ya? The cop asked pleasantly. Gosh now, sir, can I see your driver's license and your registration? Sure. Peter took his wallet out of his back pocket. Car's not mine, though. It's my sister's. We're driving it back to New York for her from Oregon. She was at Reed College in Portland. He was babbling. He knew it, but wasn't sure he could stop it. It was weird how cops could get you running off at the mouth like this, as if you had a dismembered body or a kidnapped child in the trunk. You remember doing the same thing when the cop had pulled him over on the Long Island Expressway, talking and talking, yada, 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 yada. While all the time the cop said nothing, went methodically on with his own business, checking first his paperwork and then the contents of his little blue plastic breathalyzer kit. Mark, did you get the registration? Oh, Mayor, excuse me, that's an E. Mayor, did you get the registration out of the glove compartment? In a little plastic envelope, along with insurance paper. First, she didn't move. He could see her out of the corner of his eye, just sitting still. As he opened his wallet and began hunting for his driver's license, it should have been right there in one of the windowed compartments in the billfold, big as life, but it wasn't. Mayor? He asked again, a little impatient now, a little frightened all over again. What if he'd lost his goddamn driver's license somewhere? Dropped it on the floor at Gary's, maybe while he'd been transferring the crap. You always seem to carry so much more crap in your pockets while you're traveling. From one pair of jeans to the... He hadn't, of course, but wouldn't just be typical if. Little help, Mayor? Get the goddamn registration, please? Oh, sure, okay. She bent forward like some old rusty piece of machinery, goosed into life by a sudden jolt of electricity, and opened the glove compartment. Began to root through it, lifting some stuff out. A half-finished bag of smart food, a Bonnie Raitt tape that had suffered miscarriage in Desiree's dashboard player, map of California so she could get at the stuff behind it. Peter could see small beads of perspiration on her left temple. Feathers of her short black hair were dumped with it, although the air conditioning vent on the side was blowing cool air directly into her. I don't, started, and then with unmistakable relief, oh, here it is. At the same moment, Peter looked into the compartment where he kept his business cards and saw his license. He couldn't remember putting it in there. Why in the name of God, what do you have? But there it was. In the photograph, he looked not like an assistant professor of English at NYU, but an unemployed petty laborer, possibly serial killer. Yet it was him, recognizably him, and he felt his spirits lift. They had their papers, God was in his heaven, all was right in the world. Besides, he thought, handing the cop his license, this isn't Albania, you know. It may not be in our zone of perception, but it's definitely not Albania. Pete? Peter? He looked, took the envelope she was holding out, and gave her a wink. He tried to smile in acknowledgement, but it didn't work very well. Outside, a gust of wind threw sand against the side of the car. Tiny grains of it stung Peter's face, and he slitted his eyes against it. Suddenly, he wanted to be at least 2,000 miles from in any direction. He took Desiree's registration, held it out to the cop, but the cop was still looking at his license. See, you're an organ donor, the cop said, without looking up. Do you really think that's wise? Peter was nonplussed. Well, is that the vehicle registration, sir? The cop asked crisply. He was now looking at the canary yellow sheet of paper. Yes. Hand it to me, please. Peter handed it out the window. Now the cop, still squatting Indian fashion in the sunlight, or squinting Indian fashion at the sunlight, had Peter's driver's license in one hand and Desiree's registration in. He looked back and forth between them in what seemed a very long time. Peter felt light pressure on his thigh, jumped a little before realizing it was. He took it, felt her fingers wrap around his at once. Sister? The cop said finally. He looked up at them with his bright gray eyes. Yes. Her name is Finney. Yours is Jackson. Desiree's married for a year, between high school and college. Her voice was firm, pleasant, unafraid. Peter would have believed it completely if not for the clutch of her finger. Kept her husband's name. That's all it is. A year, Between high school and college? Married? His head remained down over the documents. Peter could see the peak of his smoky bear hat ticking away, or ticking back and forth as he fell to examining them again. Peter's sense of relief was slipping away. Between high school and college, the cop, head down, big face hidden, and in his head, Peter heard him say, I see you're in Oregon, don't you? Do you really think that's wise? The cop looked up. Would you step out of the car, please, Mr. Jackson? Mary's fingers bore down, her nails biting into the back of Peter's hand. But the burning sensation was far away. Suddenly his balls and the pit of his stomach were crawling with dismay, and he felt like a child again, a confused child who only knows for sure that he was doing something bad. What? Top where the Desperation cruiser stood. It was like watching a freight elevator go up. The head disappeared, then the white-collared shirt with its gleaming badge, then the diagonal strap of the Sam Brown belt. And Peter was looking at the heavy belt buckle again, the gun, and the khaki fold of cloth over the man's fly. This time, what came out, what came from above the top of the window wasn't a question. Get out of the car, Mr. Jackson. Hi! I am actually reading Desperation. Stephen King wrote this one. It goes hand in hand with The Regulators that Richard Bachman actually wrote. This was written in 96. Actually only going on to the third chapter. So we are not too far in. And I'm going to leave this up like I did The Running Man. And then if they excuse me, if they want me to take it down, I will, but I figured I'd do it in parts. There are, let me see. Can't even find the last page. 690 pages. Which isn't too bad. My last few books have been quite short, but Under the Dome was actually over 1,000, so this one shouldn't take too long. Reading it over Twitch will be a little different though, because I didn't read Under the Dome, but I did read The Running Man. Figured we'd do a couple chapters, read for like an hour and then go on to something else, So far, honestly, it's basically Peter and Mary Jackson driving down the US 50 in Nevada, and they got pulled over by a cop. I can look some up. I just have to find some. Yeah, I can read anything. Actually, let me take a note. I will. I have not seen the Barbie movie. I thought about going to see it, but I think I'm gonna wait till it comes on to our Roku. We have a Roku, and we can bring movies in as they go on. It's like watching the movies at home, more comfortable, and we can pause anytime we want. We don't have to worry about like missing anything if we have to go to the bathroom or anything. So yeah, I'd like to watch it. I would. Margot Robbie in that compared to um her playing Harley, I think is because this is something a lot different. Um Barbie's more uplifting, whereas Harley was. So yeah. Dude. They actually, back in the 90s, McDonald's actually had these little like cartoon shows, and they were Ronald McDonald, and they had the characters from, Birdie to Grimace to the Hamburglar. Um, they had bad guys in it. It was really, yeah, right. My kids loved them. They were videotapes, of course, not DVDs yet, but yeah, that would be fun to have a Ronald McDonald movie. They needed to figure, if they can come up with an actual like live action. That'd be something to throw at somebody that director. We need to do this. I told my puppy she was, but so she won't. Yeah. We have not gotten too far in this, so you guys haven't missed a whole lot. We are on USB, and we are pulled over for some reason we don't know yet. Mary and Peter Jackson. So, but yeah, I have some notes. If anybody wants to make some recommendations for books, I can look up. Especially if I can find some stuff on Kindle. I have a tablet that I can read off of. Ronald sitting on the park bench, eating burgers after burgers. Big smile. That should be the end of be the end scene. I mean, he is the mascot of, Donald, so watching him eat burgers would be funny as if Hamburglar steals all the burgers like a thief. But it's like Zorro and a thief combined is what he looks like. And then Grimace is just like eggplant looking. Birdie is chicken. Then you have the chicken nuggets. You have the little pom pom guys. I don't know what those guys. They were funny. Ronald McDonald has a dog. Yeah. I can't remember. Ah, Sunday. That's right. Sunday. Um, they have you. Wait, they have a movie called Ronald. 2014 short. Huh. That's funny. One man, Joe Maggard. One supersized pair of. Hey, off there. I was. One supersized pair of big red magic shoes. Over 99 billion served. Superhero Ronald McDonald leaps into action at the moment notice and fights childhood obesity. Oh my god. Oh. Yeah, his dog's name is Sunday. And he's kind of cute. He's white, got like brown on his head. Yeah. Like I said, my kids love those shows and they get into all kinds of adventures. No. No, 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 no. This house is quiet because my dogs are chill. Usually it's very chaotic. Everybody down here, Mom, hey mom, I need you to do something. Mom, I need you to do something. I got my oldest son is here on the couch. It's where he fell asleep last night. My other two kids, my upstairs, and my hubby listening to. He sometimes joins in on the call too, so it's kind of Sometimes he walks, depending on what. Yeah, it's a nice big house. I can do my thing, eating, writing. I have my desk behind me, but I also have this desk here, and it allows me if I or I can go. Doesn't matter. Either way, it's still nice. All right, you guys ready? Any more questions? I don't mind. I don't mind. Nice that you guys interact. Stephen King lose his mind? Did he lose his mind? I don't know. Why did Stephen King lose it? Stephen King he has written so much horror. I cannot imagine all that in his head. Like I've read Dreamcatcher, read Shining, not and way the movie, and then I read Richard Bachman Rage, Code Work, Running Man, and Regulators. And I'll tell you what, Bachman was just as good as now. Stephen King happens. Sometimes people change relevant. Other times their views. You can have one view 20, 30 years ago and your view will completely change. Kind of like it's kind of like when you change your eating habits. Like when I was younger, I couldn't stand Brussels sprouts. Now I eat them. I didn't like liver and onions. I'll eat onions now, but I won't touch. But as your food changes, as the way that you eat changes, so does your opinion, so does your views, so does a lot of other stuff. Is it really, or is it my voice? Because my voice sucks right now. We are trying to figure out what is causing the issues in this house. I might actually have to move stuff into the room because I am being blocked by something and we don't. Oh, that sucks. I'm not sure why the audio shouldn't, 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 shouldn't. Gonna have. Oh, I wonder if that's what the problem is. Why are you not using the audio that it's not using the audio for my cam? That doesn't. Huh. That might be why it's acting so stupid. Is it really clearer now? Oh, wow. I actually turned it up. That's what I did. I sound like crap, though. I do. Like, my throat is still. Oh, awesome. I'm glad. Yeah, it was honestly, I turned it up and that's all it needed, I guess. But thank you. Yeah, I don't know because I don't hear myself, so I don't know if there's something wrong with the audio unless somebody lets me know. So that's awesome. I'm glad it's working better because now I can sound better. My coffee turning cold. I have cold coffee now. All right. So, all right. So we are about to find out why this cop wants Peter Jackson out of the car. Chapter 3. Peter pulled the handle and the cop stood back so he could swing the door open. The cop's head was cut off by the roof of the Acura. Mary squeezed Peter's hand more violently than ever, and Peter turned back to look at her. The sunburned places on her cheeks and brow were even clearer now, because her face had gone almost ashy. Her eyes were very wide. "Don't get out of the car," she mouthed. "I have to," he mouthed back, and swung a leg onto the asphalt of US 50. For a moment, Mary clung to him, her hand entwined in his, and then Peter pulled loose and got the rest of the way out, standing on legs that felt queerly distant. The cop was looking down at him. 6'7", Peter thought. Gotta be. And he suddenly saw a quick sequence of events, like a film clip run at super speed. The huge cop drawing his gun and pulling the trigger, spraying Peter Jackson's educated brains across the roof of the Acura in a slimy fan. Then yanking Mary out of the car, driving her face first into the lid of the closed trunk, bending her over, then trigger warnings, then raping her right out here beside the highway in the searing desert sunshine. His smoky bear hat still planted squarely on his head, screaming, "You want to donate an organ, lady? Here you go, here you go." And then he rocked and thrust. Oh, that was... "What's this about, officer?" Peter asked, his mouth and throat suddenly dry. "I think I have a right to know." Step around to the rear of the car, Mr. Jackson." The cop turned and walked toward the back of the Acura without bothering to see if Peter was going to obey. Peter did obey, walking on legs that still felt as if they were relaying their sensory input by some form of telecommunications. The cop stopped beside the trunk. When Peter joined him, he pointed at one with one pink finger. Peter followed it and saw there was no license plate on the back of Desiree's car, just a marginally cleaner rectangle where it had been. "Ah, shit," Peter said, and his irritation and dismay were real enough. But so was the relief beneath them. All this had a point after all. Thank God. He turned toward the front of the car and wasn't exactly surprised to see the driver's door was now closed. Mary had closed it. He had been so far into this occurrence, this whatever it is, that he hadn't even heard the thump. "Mare! Hey, Mare!" She poked her sunburned, strained face out the window and looked back at him. "Our damned license plate fell off," he called, almost laughing. "What?" "No, it didn't," the Desperation cop said. He squatted again, and then that calm, slow, lithe movement, and reached beneath the bumper. He fumbled there on the other side of the place where the plate went. For a moment or two, his gray eyes glazing off toward the horizon, Peter was invaded by an eerie sense of familiarity. He and his wife had been pulled over by the Marlboro Man. "Ah," the cop said. He stood up again. The hand he had been investigating with was clenched into a tight fist. He held it out to Peter and opened it. Lying on his palm, and looking very small in that vast pinkness, was a dirty piece of screw. It was bright in only one place, where it had been sheared off. Peter looked at it, then up at the cop. I don't get it." "Did you stop it, Fallon?" "No." There was a crack at Mary's doors open as Mary's doors opened, a clank as she shut it behind her, and then a scuff of sneakers on the sandy shoulder as she walked toward the back of the car. Sure we did, she said. She looked at the fragment of metal in the big hand. Desiree's registration and Peter's license plate were still in the cop's other hand. And then up at the cop's face. She didn't seem scared now. Not as scared, anyway. And Peter was glad. He was already calling himself 9 kinds of paranoid idiot, but you had to admit that this particular close encounter of the cop kind had its, do you really think that's wise? Particularly aspects. Pit stop, Peter, don't you remember? We didn't need gas. You said we could do that in Ellie, but we got sodas so we could we wouldn't feel guilty about asking to use the restrooms. She looked at the cop and tried to smile. She had to crane back to see his face. To Peter, she looked like a little girl trying to coax a smile out of Daddy after Daddy had gotten home from a bad day at the office. The restrooms were very clean. He not he nodded. Was that Fillmore Fast or Burke's Conoco you stopped at? She glanced uncertainly at Pete. He turned his hands up at his shoulder level. I don't remember, he said. Hell, I barely remember stopping. The cop tossed the useless chunk of screw back over his shoulder and into the desert, where it would lie undisturbed for a million years, unless it caught an inquisitive bird's eye. But I bet you remember the kids hanging around outside, older kids mostly, 1 or 2 maybe, too old to actually be kids at all. The younger ones with skateboards or on rollerblades. Peter nodded. He thought of Mary asking him why the people were here, why they came, why they stopped. That was the Fillmore Fast. Peter looked to see if the cop was wearing a name tag on one of his short shirt pockets, but he wasn't. So for now, at least, he have to stay just the cop. The one looked like a Marlboro man in the magazine ads. Alfie Burke won't have him around anymore. Kick him the hell out. They're a dastardly bunch. Mary cocked her head at that, and for a moment Peter could see the ghost of a smile at the corners of her mouth. Are they a gang? Peter asked. He still didn't see where this was going. Close, but you'd get in a place as small as Fallon, the cop said. He raised Peter's license to his face and looked at it, looked at Peter, lowered it again. But he did not offer to give it back. Dropouts, for the most part. And one of the hobbies is kiffin out-of-state license plates. It's like a dare thing. I imagine they got yours while you were buying your cold drinks or using the facilities. You know this, and they still do it? Mary asked. Fallon's not my town. I rarely go there. Their ways are not my ways. What should we do about the missing plate? Peter asked. I mean, this is a mess. The car's registered in Oregon, but my sister has gone back to New York to live. She hated Reed. Did she? The cop asked. Gosh, now. Peter could feel Mary's eyes shift to him, probably wanting him to share for her moment of amusement. But that didn't seem like a good idea to him. Not at all. She said going to school there was like trying to go to school in the middle of a Grateful Dead concert, he said. Anyway, she flew back to New York. My wife and I thought it would be fun to go out and get the car for her, bring it back to New York. Desiree packed a bunch of her stuff in the trunk, clothes mostly. He was babbling again, and he made himself stop. So what do? We can't very well drive all the way across the country with no license plate on the back of the car, can we? The cop walked around the front of the Acura, moving very deliberately. He still had Peter's license and Desiree's canary yellow registration slip in one hand. His sand brown belt creaked. Then he reached the front of the car to put his hands behind his back and stood frowning down at something. To Peter, he looked like an interested patron at an art gallery. Dastardly, he'd said. A dastardly bunch. Peter didn't think he had ever actually heard the word used in conversation. I haven't. The cop walked back toward them. Mary moved next to Peter, but her fright seemed gone. She was looking at the big man with interest. That was all. The front plate's okay, the cop said. Put that one on the back. You won't have any problem getting to New York on that basis. Oh, Peter said. Okay, good idea. Do you think a wrench Do you have a wrench and a screwdriver? I think all my tools back sitting on the bench at the town garage. The cop grinned. It lit his whole face and formed his eyes, turned him into a different man. Oh, these are yours. He held out the license and registration. There's a little toolkit in the trunk, I think, Mary said. She sounded giddy. And that was how Peter felt. Pure relief, he supposed. I saw it while I was putting on my makeup case between the spare tire and the side. Officer, I want to thank you, Peter said. The big cop nodded. He wasn't looking at Peter, though. His gray eyes were apparently fixed on the mountains off to his left. Just doing my job. Peter walked to the driver's door of the car, wondering why he and Mary had been so afraid in the first place. That's nonsense, he told himself as he pulled the keys out of the ignition switch. They were on a smile face keychain, which was pretty much par for the course. Desiree's course, anyway. Mr. Smiley Smile, her name for him, was the sister's trademark. She put happy yellow ones on the flaps of most of her letters, and occasionally a green one with a downturned mouth and a blah tongue stuck out if she happened to be having a bad day. I wasn't afraid, not really, neither was Mary. Boink, a lie. He had been afraid of Mary. Well, Mary had been damn close to terrified. Okay, maybe we were a little freaked, he thought, picking out the trunk key as he walked to the back of the car again. So sue us. The sight of Mary standing next to the big cop was like some sort of optical illusion. The top of her head barely came to the bottom of his rib cage. Peter opened the trunk, on the left, neatly packed, covered with hefty bags to keep the dust off them, were Desiree's clothes. In the center, Mary's makeup case, and their 2 suitcases, his and hers, were wedged in between the green bundles and the spare tire. Although tire was much too grand a word for it, Peter thought. It was just one of those blow-up donuts, good for a run to the nearest service station, if you were lucky. He looked between the donut and the trunk's sidewall. There was nothing there. Mary, I don't see... There, she pointed. That gray thing. That's it. It worked its way in the back of the spare. That's all. He could have snaked his arm into the gap, but it seemed easier just to lift the uninflated rubber donut out of the way. He was leaning it against the back bumper when he heard Mary's sudden intake of breath. It sounded as if she had been pinched or poked. Oh, hey, the cop said mildly. What's this? Mary and the cop were looking into the trunk. The cop looked interested and slightly bemused. Mary's eyes were bulging, horrified. Her lips were trembling. Peter turned, looking into the trunk again, following their gaze. There was something in the spare tire well. It had been under the donut. For a moment, he either didn't know what it was or didn't want to know what it was, and then the crawling sensation started in his lower belly again. This time there was also a sense of sphincters not loosening but dropping. And as if the muscles which ordinarily held it up were where it belonged had dozed off, he became aware that he was squeezing his buttocks together. But even that was far away, in another time zone. He felt an all too brief certainty that this was a dream. Had to be. The big cop gave him a look, his bright gray eyes still particularly empty, then reached into the spare tire well and brought out a baggie, a big one, a gallon-sized, and stuffed full of greenish-brown herbal matter. Strapping tape, plastered on the front of the round yellow sticker, Mr. Smiley Smile. Perfect emblem for potheads like his sister, whose adventures in life could have been titled Through Darkest America with Bong and Roach Clip. She had gotten pregnant while stoned, and had undoubtedly decided to marry Roger Finney while stoned, and Peter knew for a fact that she had left Reed, carrying a 1-point forget-it grade average, because there was too much dope floating around, and she just couldn't say no to it. She'd been upfront about that part, at least, and he had actually looked through the Acura for stashes. It would be stuff she'd forgotten about rather than stuff she'd actually hidden, most likely, before they left Portland. He'd looked under the hefty bags for clothes, The hefty bags of clothes were stored in, and Mary had thumbed through the clothes themselves, either admitting out loud that they were looking for, both knowing. Oh, neither admitting. But neither of them had thought to look underneath the donut. The goddamn donut. The cop squeezed the baggie with one oversized thumb as if it was a tomato. He reached into his pocket and produced a Swiss Army knife. He plucked out the smallest blade. "Officer," he said with a weak voice. "Officer, I don't know how that—" "Shh," the cop said, and cut a tiny slit in the baggie. Peter felt Mary's hand tugging at his sleeve. He took her hand, this time folding his fingers around hers. All at once he could see Desiree's pale, pretty face floating just behind his eyes. Her blonde hair, which still fell to her shoulders with natural Stevie Nicks curlettes. Her eyes, which were always a bit confused. "You stupid little bitch," he thought. "You ought to be very grateful that you're not where I can get my hands on you right now." "Officer," Mary tried. The cop raised his hand to her, palm out, to put the tiny slit in the bag again against his nose, and sniffed. His eyes drifted close, and for a moment he opened them again and lowered the baggie. He held out his hand, palm up. "Give me your keys, sir," he said. "Officer, I can explain this. Give me your keys. If just... Are you deaf? Give me your keys." He only raised his voice a little, but it was enough to start Mary crying, feeling like someone had been having an out-of-body experience. Peter dropped Desiree's car keys into the cop's waiting hand and then put his arm around his wife's shaking shoulders. "Afraid you folks are going to have to come with me," the cop said. His eyes went from Peter to Mary and then back to Peter again. When they did, Peter realized what it was about them that bothered him. They were bright, like the minutes before sunrise on the foggy morning, but they were also dead somehow. "Please," Mary said, her voice wet. "It's a mistake. His sister—" "Get in the car," the cop said, indicating the cruiser. The flashers were still pulsing on the roof, bright enough in the bright desert light. "Right now, please, Mr. and Mrs. Jackson." I lost my bookmark. It was right here. Maybe I ate it? Ah! It was underneath. I found it. So, as of right now, I must have hit my laptop. As of right now, we are going to pause there because that's 3 chapters for today. I'll have to look and see how many chapters this actually is because I have no clue how many chapters this is. Wait, there's sections? Okay, so there's 5 parts, and so we'll see how it goes because we're in part 1, but part 1's probably pretty big. Yeah, we're gonna stop there because if I talk too much, if I read too much, I'm gonna completely lose my voice. So, yeah, we will read Desperation, and what I will do is I will not read it outside of Twitter or Twitch. Jesus. Oh, my brain today. We will not read it outside of Twitch, and that way you guys can read it with me if you want. So if you guys want me to read, let me know. It keeps me busy, keeps me occupied, keeps me from being depressed. Reading, writing, gaming, and I don't game like people do. I do like a few Facebook games, and then I do Sims 3 and 4, and then I also finished Portal. So that I had a little help from my son to finish that, but I got through that. So I try to keep myself busy as much as I can. So right now, if I talk much longer, I'm going to lose my voice. So I'm going to let you guys go. I'm going to calm my voice, let it just quiet, and hopefully I will be back tomorrow morning and we can read some more. We'll probably read another 3-4 chapters, so we'll see how I'm feeling. All right? So I just want to thank you for coming by. I want to thank you for following if you have, and I really appreciate it. So, y'all have a good day. Love you. Bye.